The Employee Service Center is essentially what the portal is called in modern releases of ServiceNow. But I wanted to start a little bit with a history lesson, and I think it's important because it may confuse people what the track record of the HR portal was, and essentially why it's called the ESC now. I know I was very confused when I was first introduced to it back in Jakarta. I've seen the HR portal / ESC grow and evolve since Jakarta from a developer's perspective. So back in, I believe it was in Istanbul, Jakarta, just part of the human resources scoped app, they had an HR portal. And that HR portal was, its primary function was to deliver the capability for end users to manage their cases that they submit and their to-dos, or AKA HR tasks, that they have to do within the HR scope. So it was very, very HR centric. And of course, back then in Istanbul, Jakarta, Kingston era, we could, on the portal, we could only configure one single knowledge base and one single service catalog. That's changed now globally. So, for a variety of portals, we can have more than one knowledge base, more than one service catalog. But yeah, back then, the primary function for cases and to do was cases and to dos. So what I wanted to do was go back. I was just searching on Google, and I was looking for a screenshot of what ultimately the HR portal looked like back in Jakarta. I didn't really find anything, but I think what I found here was an image of prior to the scoped app version of the HR portal. It pretty much looked like this. I think the only difference was a banner image here that actually said the words Employee Service Center. But you can see what's going on the landing page of the portal, old school portal, is you had a variety of items in the header. You had a capability to email HR, chat with HR, and then there was the catalog, knowledge base. What you don't see here in the header is the to-dos menu item and the cases menu item. Now, what was really weird back then in Jakarta is that that's the only area other than the landing page here where the end user could manage their to-dos or take action on their to-dos or look at their cases. There was no page dedicated to listing out the user's cases or tasks. It was just either from the header or from the landing page. Very odd. So this is, it was pretty, it was in pretty rough shape back in Jakarta, but they also implemented another feature on the landing page, and that was a variety of widgets that had content that would show based on configurable user criteria and HR criteria. Now, for those of you that may not know what user criteria or HR criteria is, it's a way to define a certain population of users in the system. So, and I don't want to really spend too much time in, and I'd love to go into the back end and actually create one, but I don't think I have time for that. So you can essentially name a criteria, let's say all active users. And then within that, you have a condition builder, and you would go to the sysuser table and set a filter on active equals true. So you now have a user criteria called all active users that are identifying a population of users that are active in the system. So you could build content, for example, an announcement, or let's say a particular event. I'm gonna show you a little. I'm gonna demo this more in the New York version here, but and you could create that content for that set of users, and only those users that fit that HR criteria would see it on the content. That was something really cool that was happening back in Jakarta. You had a way to have ultimately tailored content for the user specifically when they hit the portal. Now, what I think happened, and this is not exactly what ServiceNow probably would say, but just as a developer seeing what happened to this to the human resources portal, the HR portal, from release to release, I think what happened is ServiceNow ultimately said, "Whoa, I think we created something really cool here with the HR criteria or the targeted content. we think that maybe this shouldn't be specifically HR. So what you started to see in Jakarta was a shift away from calling it the HR portal and towards calling it the employee service center. And the reason why they started moving towards the ESC, aside for being able to deliver targeted content, is that they wanted to start leveraging that capability to call the ESC a more of an enterprise level portal where it wasn't just for HR. It wasn't a portal where end users could go to for just HR capabilities. They added the functionality to allow for a single portal that end users could go to manage their HR cases, to order a laptop, to, I don't know, to facilities management, whatever you have. And that capability wasn't possible in Jakarta, but it is now starting sort of in London, more so in Madrid. And for a variety of the reasons, some of those being now you no longer have simply cases, you have a capability, the end user has a capability of managing or listing out all of their requests, not just cases, and they can browse multiple knowledge bases, not just the HR knowledge base, and they can browse multiple catalogs, not just the HR catalog. And then we're going to get into this last bullet point here in a minute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the HR portal. So now this is, and I apologize to keep using the terms interchangeably, but this is the Employee Service Center. So what you now have, as you can see in the top right-hand corner, the menu, the top menu, you now have a requests instead of case drop-down menu. And if the end user clicks on that, they now have this listing of all of their requests. And as you can see, this is actually really cool. As you can see that what's mixed in this list of requests is their HR cases, their service requests, and there's even, I don't think there's demo data for this, but there's even incidents in there as well. And that is governed by a module in the back end called My Request Filters. So this is really cool because you can, as a developer, as a consultant, you can configure what types of requests or tasks or whatever show up in this My Request. Maybe you just want this for only HR, and you would configure the request filters to only show HR here. But by default, they've got HR cases, service requests, and incidents listed out here. So pretty cool. You even have the capability, of course, if you have a custom request type, to add that to the list. And the end user now has a single point of reference for all of their requests. Pretty cool. Didn't have this in Jakarta and in London. Or sorry, in Jakarta. So, and then of course you still have a to-dos, but they've blown this out and they've gotten this more advanced. These are the to-dos, that the HR tasks and to-dos that get assigned to end users to complete based off of cases that they're related to. And I say related to, but because there's a variety of different types of tasks that the end user may have. So I have a few examples here. You'll notice that there's a particular task here for the end user to complete their profile information, and this is all widgets that are embedding certain widgets, and this particular widget is the employee profile update widget. There's another task for me to, I think when I move this over to my my account, there usually this shows a document, but I think I didn't have demo data for the document management portion. But anyways, this is an e-signature. So I have another task here where I have to actually sign my name and then accept it. And then there's what's called a watch video HR task, which they have to watch a video, and once they're done, they have to click complete. There is a accept resolution task, which it's not really a task, but once a HR case goes into waiting acceptance, which is like kind of like your pending closed or your awaiting closure, there is a piece there where the person that requested the case has to accept or reject the resolution of the case and has the option to enter more information. So I have to say, from a developer's perspective, this is very convoluted in terms of widgets and functionality. I'm going to give you a brief example of that. It's embedded within the human resource service portal scope, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but the capability of embedding a widget within a widget, ServiceNow does a lot of that. So you've got you know, widgets embedded within widgets, which are embedded within those widgets, and it just keeps going. And it's and same thing with the I wanted to show you the details of an HR case that I had submitted. Same thing with this HR ticket detail page. There's a lot going on in here as well. Lots of embedded widgets, and what the end user is able to see for a particular case. What you see here, what the end user ends up seeing here, is actually configured by what's called the HR case header configuration. And there's different. We were looking at a default for opener or approver, but I think more importantly is default for the subject person. These are kind of the fields, person detail view, and then the detail row that shows up right here. So it's important to note, because that is configurable, and we've had clients that said, you know, we don't really want the end user to see what HR agent their case is assigned to. So they had us take that off, and that's just configurable within the HR case header configuration. I'm going to skip ahead because I haven't got to what I am actually most interested in, and what I think is the coolest part of ESC, which interestingly enough is not part of ESC endemically. So the last piece I wanted to go over is the profile page. If any of you have had experience with typical service portals in ServiceNow, there's always a profile page where they can fill out additional information, but you'll notice that there's a little bit different. There's a couple other widgets here where they can actually fill out their personal information. And what's important to note is that this gets plugged into the HR profile record, not the sysuser record, but the actual HR profile record, because this is sensitive information, and this is further locked down into the HR security scope. They also have the ability to add contacts, emergency contacts, and once again, this is also within the HR scope because this is sensitive information for the user. So the next thing I wanted to do is just give you kind of a glimpse of what the Employee Service Center looks like, and what pages it is comprise the Employee Service Center. So as you'll see, there's a bunch of pages. The ESC dashboard is, of course, the landing page. But this is what you see here. There's some widgets here, and they're all part of the badge here indicates what scope that widget is in as part of. And what you see here is a couple widgets that are actually part of this application called Content Delivery. Interesting. So back to my slide here. So as I mentioned earlier, in its infancy, the HR portal had the capability of providing content to HR and user criteria. Well, now that's controlled by Content Delivery, which actually is now, I think, started in Madrid as an entirely separate scope. It's an entirely different app. ESC leverages it, but it is not technically specific to HR, and that's the cool stuff that I'm going to get into really quick here. So as you can see, there's very ESC specific pages, the KB article view. I'm not really going to go into that because it's very similar to just out of the box portals with some additional stuff. But you'll see that it also leverages the catalog item page. And okay, so what I really wanted to show you is the HRM ticket page. So these are the widgets that show up on the page, and you'll notice these indentations. Those indicate embedded widgets. So if you're looking to change something, customize something, like for example the case description, you'll notice that if you wanted to customize that or clone that, you would then have to clone the HRM info tabs as well, because it's referencing the case description widget, which would then require you to clone and edit and customize the HRM case info widget. All of these widgets call a lot of script includes, HR specific script includes that are also quite complex and quite convoluted. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how crazy that particular page and its set of widgets are. But back to the content delivery. So on the landing page, what you're seeing here, for example, this big banner with a lady with her cell phone, is a banner which is part of a content that's on the landing page. You've got announcements, you have upcoming events, videos, information, suggested reading, quick link, like all of this stuff, except for top-rated KB articles. All of this stuff is targeted content, and it's now delivered by the content delivery application, not the way it was in HR. It was specifically for HR portal, and now it's content delivery. So if you install the plugin for the ESC, you will, I think by default, it'll install the content delivery plugin as well. So what we have here is an entire module of different portal content, and this list right here, the portal content list right here, is the full list of content. What you don't really see is what portal this is for. So if we went in and took a look at one particular record, you'll notice that this content is you can't really tell like what portal it shows up until you go to schedule content. And within that, you'll see the page that it is configured to show up, and that is not our ESC portal. So what I did, instead of showing the portal content, is I just have a custom dashboard here that I created that lists out the content for the specific ESC dashboard page. So the example that I always go to, which is now off my list, is the monthly barbecue upcoming event content. So you'll see that right here, that there is a piece of content that's been added to the landing page for the ESC, and it's of type, it's of type content type event. And to go into that in a little bit deep, I'm just going to save this really quick so I can go back to it really quick. To go into that, there are a variety of content types that are configured. And you'll see that right here. And you can see there's quite a number of them. The one that we were just looking at is an event right here. And there are a bunch of other ones. The one that's super cool is the rich text, and hopefully I'll get a chance to show you that quickly here. But these are the different content types you can select when you're creating portal content. And the monthly barbecue one is a content type of event. Now, why that's important is based on, there are a bunch of UI policies on this form, but based on your selection, when you select, for example, event, you have a variety of other different fields that appear for that particular content type, like event start and event end. If I were to select a different type of content, you'll see that we no longer have an event field related fields for rich text fields. So I'm just going to go back to the event here. And there's some information here. This kind of, I wanted to go into this as well, but you can actually personalize this information based off of the fields that you select here. Like, for example, I can say, instead of this bland information, I could say, yo, and bring in some, like the person's first name. Let's go to the user, what is it, user table, find the first name field, drop that in, and say, yo. And now I've actually customized this content even further and brought in the person's first name. So if I did that right, right here, we should see the actual person's first name. So let's go to that barbecue here. Yep, yo Todd. So with rich text, you can do that essentially with any rich text format, any piece of content that has the rich text field enabled. And that, I think, out of the box includes the events as well as the announcements. Now, what's important to know is I've been configuring this piece of content, but without scheduling the content, you will never see this on the portal. You've created the content, but you've not indicated to ServiceNow where and when that should be showing up. So there's a second one here. What we're going to look at is the one that we actually see on the demo right here, and that is the content for Monthly Barbecue Madrid. Now, What's interesting about the schedule content related form is that here's where you configure what page it's can actually show up on. I won't go into widget instance, but this can actually be configured into different widgets as well. For example, if you have this widget on a different page, you can have it show up on that page instead, or that instance instead of this instance. Or if you had multiple instances of events for whatever reason. But here is actually what is configured for the content that dictates whether it shows up. And where there are some, cut and dry fields here, like the active field. So if your content record is inactive, it's not going to show up, even if it meets this other criteria. By default, the availability start and end date is blank, which means that this particular content will show forever. I think a better example would be like the announcements. This content will show forever unless you specify a start or end date. And here's where the magic happens. This content is designed to only be visible to active users. Active users is now an audience. So you remember earlier when I was talking about HR criteria and user criteria, they blew that up into something that's a little bit more understandable to the human language, and that's called audiences. So for this particular monthly barbecue content, we've scheduled it for the active users audience. So now if we go to look at audiences, then we've got a whole set of audiences here. And here's that active users audience that we saw earlier. And here you have a condition builder that defines what active users are. And it's quite simply active is true on the sysuser record. But you can see here's some great examples. California employees. So this is an actual audience that points to an HR criteria called California employees. And I'm not going to get into it, but this California HR criteria, California employees looks at I believe their state field. So any user with a state field of California. So what you can actually glean from the fact that you have an audience here called California employees is this monthly barbecue. We're assuming it's somewhere physically located, right? So maybe we only want this to actually show up for people that can actually reach that monthly barbecue. For example, let's say this barbecue is actually in California. Well, I can go to that content and I can say, all right, well, the only people I want to see this monthly barbecue event is the California employees. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I have now created a content that will only appear and is targeted for California employees. So to give you a much larger example, I was on a project where the company was global, and they had subsidiaries all over the globe. They had some subsidiaries in Europe. They had some in Africa. They had some in Japan, South America. And within those subsidiaries, some of those subsidiaries were also global. So they had, for their ESC portal, they had a whole bunch of content that was designed for, I mean, it was pretty complex, but it was super cool because based on who you were, what subsidiary you're part of, where in the world you were, you would see different content. So we had content that was designed for people in subsidiary ABC that were in Brazil, only for Brazil people that were part of subsidiary ABC. We also had another piece of content that would show for people as part of subsidiaries, DEF, that were in England, for example. And what you then have is this, it's really cool. You have this capability of delivering content specifically to your audience, to your users. And that in itself, I think is super cool functionality. And ServiceNow evidently does, so much so that they've broken that out into a separate scope, a separate app, and you can actually leverage this on other portals, other out-of-the-box portals, like, for example, Service Portal or whatever, what have you. So much so that they've actually have what's called a content delivery demo portal, and I'm going to give you a quick show of this. This is just it's literally called content delivery demo. So what they have here is all of those widgets on another separate portal, leveraging the content from content delivery. And you'll see a bunch of custom content, and a lot of this looks familiar to what's on the ESC because the ESC is using it as well. Really cool. So the takeaway, and then the takeaway really is, yeah, the HR stuff is cool. The ESC is cool, but what's really cool, what I think is going to have a tremendous value down the road is the content delivery, which ESC leverages. Let's see. The last bullet point I had on the presentation was campaigns, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that. All I will say with campaigns is it's another way to encapsulate content on the portal and have it part of a campaign. A really good example of that campaign would be open enrollment for health insurance. That's something that happens yearly, and it's something we want things to show and things to happen in a particular window every year, and that could be a campaign, and there's configurations that go into that. Interestingly enough, that's actually part of a different scope called content automation. So that's where campaigns lie.